Hi guys, so today we're going to be talking about finding slope. So let's first define what slope is. So slope is defined as rise over run. Another way to think about it is also known as rate of change. We will talk about this a little bit later towards the end of the video, okay, and what it means specifically for word problems. Okay. So what does it mean rise over run? It means that it's the change in our y values, right? And since our y values, it's up and down, that is the rise part, over the change in our x values, right? And so x values, they go left to right, and so that is our run, part of the rise over run. Okay? Another way to think about it, it is our change vertically over our change horizontally. So our formulas for slope, right? This is delta y over delta x. Okay, so this is delta in Greek, represents change. Okay. So it's how our y's changed divided by how our x's changed. And so the formula for that, if you were given 2 points, is our y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Right, so how did our y change divided by how our x changed? Okay. And this is rise over run. Okay. So we have 4 types of slope. We have positive slope, negative slope, zero slope, and undefined slope. Okay, so positive slope is when our lines look like this, right? And what happens is because our change is that we go up, right? So from one point to the other point, we're going up, and that is positive, right? Going up is towards our positive numbers, divided by, and then we're going to the right, and that is positive as well. Okay, and so positive divided by positive equals a positive number. Okay, and so lines that look like this, that are increasing, they have a positive slope. We also have negative slope, and that's when we're decreasing like this. And the reason why is because we are going downwards, which is negative. At the same time, while we're going downwards, we are also going to the right. However, going right is positive, right? And then negative divided by a positive is a negative, and that's why lines that decrease, that go downwards like this, is a negative slope. Our other 2 kinds of slope are for our horizontal and vertical lines. Okay, so this is a zero slope. The reason why is because from one point to the other, we don't go up or down at all. However, we are moving to the right. Right, so here to here, I'm not going up at all or down at all, but I am moving towards the right. And 0 divided by anything is 0, and so that's why this is zero slope, and this is for horizontal lines. For vertical lines, we have an undefined slope, and the reason for that is because from one point to the other, I'm going upwards. However, I am going 0 when it comes to left and right. As a result, we're either going up or down, either some positive or negative number. However, we are going 0 to the left or right. A number divided by 0 is undefined. And that is why our vertical lines have undefined slope. Okay. So let's turn the page and let's start talking about how we find slope. Okay. So depending on what we are given, there are different ways to find slope. However, it is still based on the idea that it is our change of y over our change of x. Okay, so what we're going to do, if we are given a table, we are going to find the constant rate of the x and y values. Right? So another way to think about it is our slope, again, right, is our change in y over our change in x. Okay? So let's get started with this first table. So again, slope is my change in y over my change in x. So I'm going to first start by looking at our y's, right? So let's say I'm going to pick two y values and I'm going to state how they change, right? So from 5 to 9, so I got to be consistent, from 5 to 9, what happened is that we added 4. Okay? And so the change in y here is that we added 4, or a positive 4. Okay? And since I use these two y values, I need to use their corresponding x values. So, right? So since I use these pairs for my y's, I'm going to use these pairs for my x's. So from 0 to 2, I added 2. And so that is the change in x. Right? And then a positive 4 divided by a positive 2 is 2. And so my slope is 2. Right? And you might be asking, but Miss Ng, what if I chose different numbers? That is absolutely fine. Okay, so let's say instead I wanted to choose the first number and the last number in my table here. So let's say I chose 1 to 17. Okay, so the thing that happened here is that I added 16, right, in my y column. Right, so that's fine, added 16. Okay. Then I got to use those same x values, right? So if I did the first and the last one, then I'm going to do the same thing for my -2 and my 6. So from -2 to 6 here, I added 8. Right? And so my x values, the change in x values, it was a positive 8. Right? Positive 16 divided by positive 8 is positive 2. And as we can see, for a linear function, right, whichever y values or x values I chose, I still get the same slope. Okay? So I'm going to have you try this one on your own. Find the slope of this table. So you should have gotten -4/3. I chose the first two numbers here, right? So my change in y is that I subtracted 4. My change in x was that I added 3. -4 divided by a positive 3 is -4/3. If you chose different numbers than I did, that's okay. It should still simplify to -4/3. Okay? So now let's talk about how to find a slope from a graph. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose 2 points on the line. Okay. I would choose points that are nice and clear, right? I wouldn't choose something in between because you don't know exactly what that number is, right? So I would choose points that you can clearly see across the graph lines there. Okay. Then you're going to count the vertical, which is our y change, and then the horizontal change. Right? And so the best thing to do is you always start with the point on the left. So whichever point you choose, you always choose the one that's on the left to start with. Okay. So I'm going to pick 2 points. Okay. Let's say I pick this one and this one here. Okay. So I'm going to do my change vertically first. So starting with my left point, I go up 1, 2. And so going up is positive, and so that's why it's a positive 2. Right. And then my horizontal change is that I go right 1. And right is positive numbers, so positive 1. And so my slope, I go up 2, and I go right 1. So those are both positive. 2 over 1 is 2, and so my slope here is 2. Okay. You might be like, but Miss Ng, what if I chose different points? That is fine, right? So let's say I chose this point and this point here. Again, the points that I'm choosing are very clear on the graph. I'm not choosing something that's in the middle of my grid, right? So again, vertical over horizontal. So here I'm going, starting from my left point, I go up 1, 2, 3, 4. Going up is positive, so positive 4 over right 1, 2. So right is positive 2. Okay, so that means up 4, right 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And so we can see, even if I chose different points, I still get the same thing. Okay, I'm going to have you try this one on your own. Find the slope. So the slope you should have gotten is -3/2 when simplified, right? So again, pick 2 points. I chose these points here. Then vertically, this time from my left point, I went down 3. And since I went down, that's negative. And then I went to the right. Right is positive, so that's positive 2. So negative 3 over positive 2, that's negative 3/2. Okay. So what if we're doing it from an equation? Okay, so if we're doing it from an equation, what we're going to do is we're first going to solve the equation for y. The reason why is because this changes it into slope-intercept form, which we'll talk more about later. Okay, and once we solve the equation for y, slope is the coefficient of x. And what the coefficient means is it's the letter before, it's the number before our letter, right? So slope here is the coefficient of x, okay? And so it'd be right here, whatever number that is, okay? So let's get started. So here I have 2x plus 5y equals 15. I'm going to start by solving for y so it gets changed into this form, which we know as slope-intercept form, okay? So since this is a positive 2x, I'm going to move it to the other side by subtracting 2x. Okay. 2x minus 2x, they undo each other, leaving me with 5y. Okay. And then just so it looks the same as this, I'm going to rewrite it with my x's in front. So it's going to be negative 2x. And since this is a positive 15, it'll be a plus 15. Okay. Please keep in mind you cannot combine these. They are not like terms. This one has an x. This is a constant. Then last thing I'm going to do, get rid of this 5 in front of y to get y by itself. I'm going to divide by 5. Okay. 5 divided by 5 is 1, so 1y equals negative 2 over 5x, so negative 2/5 x. And then 15 divided by 5 is a positive 3. And so slope, after you solved for y, it is the coefficient, the number that it's in front of x. So here, my slope is negative 2/5. Okay? So I'm going to have you try this one on your own. So start by solving for y and then find the coefficient of x. Okay, so you should have gotten 3/4. Since this is a minus, a negative 3x, you add 3x on both sides. Okay? And again, you cannot combine the 16 and 3. They're not like terms. Then you divide the 4 to get y by itself. 3 over 4 is 3/4. 16 divided by 4 is 4. And then the slope is the coefficient, the number in front of x, so the slope here is 3/4. Okay. Then the last way is when we're given 2 points. What we're going to do is we're going to start by labeling the x and y coordinates, and then we're going to find how our y's changed and how our x changed by subtracting. And so we saw the formula earlier. I will write it again for you. Okay, it was in front. But it is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. And that's our formula for slope. Okay, so we're going to start by labeling the x and y coordinates. So I'm going to label this x1, y1. This is x2, y2, and all I have to do now is plug it into the formula. So y2 minus y1, so 6 minus 3, divided by x2 minus x1, so negative 4 minus 2. 6 minus 3 is 3, negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6. 3 over negative 6, this simplifies to a negative 1/2. And so that is my slope. You might be wondering, but Miss Ng, what if instead of doing x1, y1, I labeled it as x2, y2, and this one as x1, y1? It really doesn't matter, right? So here you can see that it doesn't matter, and I'm going to show you, right? So same thing, except this time, instead of 6 minus 3, it'll be 3 minus 6. So 3 minus 6, okay, right? y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So 2 minus a negative 4. So don't forget it's a minus a negative 4, because it's minus and then whatever x1 is. Okay. 3 minus 6 is negative 3. 2 minus negative 4, minus negative means plus, so 2 plus 4 is 6. Negative 3 over 6, when I simplify it, I get negative 1/2. Right? So we can see it doesn't matter. It's just x2 goes with y2, x1 goes with y1. So I'm going to have you try this one on your own. So find the slope between these 2 points. Okay, so you should have gotten 2/3. Even if you labeled it differently from me, you should have still gotten 2/3, right? So 8 minus 4 divided by 5 minus negative 1. 8 minus 4 is 4. 5 minus negative 1 means plus 1, so 5 plus 1 is 6. 4, 6 simplified is 2/3. Okay? So last part here, we're going to talk about slope as rate of change. Right? So we actually saw this before. We saw this when we were doing our distance problem, distance equals rate times time problem. We saw our slope as rate of change there. Okay? So let's look at this problem here. So Amy rides her bike at a speed of 7 miles per hour. She has already ridden 3 miles. So if we were to write an equation to represent the total of miles Amy rides, if we call that y, based on x, the number of hours Amy rides, it would be like this. So y, her total amount of miles she rides, is 7 miles per hour times x, which is the number of hours she rides. Okay? And then since she's already ridden 3 miles, we got to add the 3 that she already has. Okay? So here, let's complete the table. Right? So in the beginning, if we haven't counted hours or time yet, she has already ridden 3 miles. Right? So there's 3. Okay? 1 hour passes, she rides 7 miles per hour. So after 1 hour passes, she's ridden 7 more miles. So now, total of 10 miles. An other hour passes, she rides 7 more miles. 17 miles total. Right? Rides for another hour, she gets another 7 miles. That would be 24 miles. If she rides another hour, she gets 7 more miles, and she gets 31. Right? So given my equation, right, find the slope given my equation, y equals 7x plus 3. So when it's in slope-intercept form, when it's already solved for y, we talked about how the slope is the coefficient of x. Right? So in this case, with our equation, we can see that the slope is 7. Okay? What about if we're looking at our table? Right? So we talked about how for our table, it is our change in y over our change in x. Okay? So here in our change in y, we can see that every hour we added 7 miles. Right? Plus 7. 17 to 24 plus 7. 24 to 31 plus 7. So what happened is our y's changed by adding 7. Our x is changed, right, by adding that 1 hour. Okay. So that's our change in x. Positive 7 divided by positive 1 equals 7. As we can see, whether with our equation or with our table, it is the same. Okay. So what does it mean as slope is the rate as rate of change? Okay. And so this is it. Okay, so our slope is 7 according to the equation and our table. The rate of change that we see in this situation is that Amy rides another 7 miles every hour, meaning her distance changes by 7 after every hour that passes. And if you remember, we said before when we did those distance problems, right, distance equals rate times time, that speed we have, that 7 miles per hour, is a rate. We see that here. Oh, it should be here. I don't know why I wrote here. We see that here. Okay. And so that's it for today. Have a great rest of the day. Bye, guys.